My name is Jennifer, and I'm 38. I often reflect on the path my life has taken. For several years, my world revolved around my husband, Richard, a devoted businessman in his late 40s. He worked long hours to provide for us, which left the house often empty and quiet during his business trips. While he was out pursuing his career, I found solace in the routine of our daily life, yet the silence was a stark reminder of the emotional distance that began to form between us. Richard had a son from a previous marriage, John, who had recently come home from college for his winter break. John was 20, tall, and strikingly handsome, inheriting his father's striking features but possessing a warmth and charisma that drew people to him. While his father was often busy with work, John filled the house with laughter and youthful energy. It was during this particular break that I began to see John in a new light, a light that flickered with something more profound than mere family ties. On the first evening after Richard's departure, I stood in the kitchen, preparing dinner as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the room. John wandered in, a casual grin spreading across his face. "Need a hand?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, his posture relaxed yet confident. "Sure, if you want to chop some vegetables," I replied, smiling back. There was a sense of comfort between us, a rapport that had grown over the years but was now tinged with an undeniable tension. As we moved around the kitchen together, our hands brushed against one another, and I felt a rush of warmth every time. It was innocent enough at first, but each touch seemed to linger longer than necessary, igniting a spark that neither of us was ready to acknowledge. That night, we decided to watch a movie together in the living room. The flickering screen illuminated our faces as we settled onto the couch, a cozy blanket draped over us. The space was intimate, and the atmosphere crackled with unspoken words. As the plot unfolded, I could feel John's arm gradually moving behind me, resting comfortably on the back of the couch. When I turned to look at him, I found him already gazing at me, his blue eyes shimmering in the soft light. "Are you enjoying the movie?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. I nodded, but before I could say anything more, he leaned in, our lips brushing together in a hesitant kiss. My heart raced as I leaned into him, deepening the connection. It was a moment suspended in time, one that shifted everything between us. When we pulled away, the world outside seemed distant, the house filled only with the sound of our breathing. The next day, the weather was bleak and rainy, creating a perfect backdrop for another cozy day indoors. I found myself in the kitchen again, making breakfast while the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. John appeared, shirtless and slightly damp from the shower, a towel slung around his neck. My breath caught at the sight of him, and I tried to maintain my composure as he flashed a grin my way. "Good morning, Jen. What's for breakfast?" he asked, leaning against the counter with a casual ease that made my heart flutter. "Just some eggs and toast. Want to help?" I offered, trying to sound casual, but the heat in my cheeks betrayed my nervousness. As we cooked together, the conversation flowed easily, each laugh drawing us closer. After breakfast, we decided to spend the afternoon watching more movies. We cuddled on the couch, our bodies touching, the blanket wrapped around us. The more we watched, the more I noticed how John would subtly inch closer, his fingers brushing against mine. With each brush, my heart raced, and I found myself wondering what it would be like to lose all inhibitions. In the late afternoon, John fell asleep beside me, his head resting on my shoulder. I watched him, mesmerized by the peaceful expression on his face. I gently ran my fingers through his hair, feeling the warmth radiate from him. My heart raced at the intimacy of the moment. Suddenly, I felt his hand wrap around my waist, pulling me closer even in sleep. I froze for a moment, unsure if I should wake him or let this sweet moment linger. Instead, I settled into him, letting the warmth of his body envelop me. That night, I found myself lost in thought as I prepared for bed. The kiss we had shared lingered in my mind, and I could feel the weight of my desires pressing against my chest. The house was too quiet without Richard, and John's presence brought both comfort and confusion. I had never imagined I could develop feelings for my stepson, but the connection we shared was undeniable. On the third day, I awoke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. It was one of those days that called for lazy hours spent indoors. I made my way to the kitchen to brew some coffee, still wrapped in my robe, when I heard John's voice from behind me. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he said, his tone teasing. He stood there, tousled hair and all, looking impossibly handsome. "Morning. Just getting some coffee," I replied, trying to play it cool, but my heart was racing again. After a quiet breakfast, we settled in the living room again, this time opting for a board game. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and playful banter. As the game progressed, I noticed how John would find excuses to touch my arm or lean in closer to whisper a joke. Every moment seemed charged with an energy that left me breathless. When we took a break, I went to the kitchen to grab snacks, and I felt John's presence behind me again. "You're really good at this," he said, his voice low as he leaned against the counter, watching me. "Thanks. Just something I enjoy," I replied, trying to keep my composure as he stood so close, the warmth radiating from his body sending shivers down my spine. Suddenly, he took a step closer, his hand reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I froze, my heart pounding. The intensity of his gaze sent a jolt of electricity through me. "Jen," he whispered, his voice husky, "I've been thinking about that kiss." "Me too," I admitted, breathless. Without another word, he leaned in, capturing my lips in a passionate kiss that ignited every nerve in my body. I melted against him, my hands finding their way to his hair as he deepened the kiss, our bodies pressed together as if the world around us had vanished. The taste of him, the urgency of our connection, felt intoxicating. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing heavily, a mix of shock and exhilaration coursing through us. I stepped back, trying to regain my composure. "We shouldn't. What if Richard finds out?" I stammered, but a part of me wanted to ignore the consequences. "We won't let that happen," John replied, determination in his eyes. "But I can't pretend I don't feel this way about you." Over the next few days, we navigated the fine line between our growing attraction and the reality of our situation. Each moment we spent together only intensified the feelings we were trying to suppress. One afternoon, as I was cleaning up after lunch, I caught John watching me, a look of desire etched on his face. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked playfully, my heart racing. "Like what?" he countered, stepping closer, his expression serious. "Like you want to kiss me again," I said, a teasing smile on my lips, but there was a truth behind my words. "Maybe I do," he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. Before I could respond, he pulled me into his arms, our lips crashing together once more. The kiss was more urgent this time, filled with a passion that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I felt alive, every part of me responding to him, and I lost myself in the moment. That evening, as the rain continued to fall outside, I found myself in the bathroom, preparing for a shower. I closed my eyes under the hot water, letting it wash away the tension. I was lost in my thoughts when I heard a soft knock on the door. "Jen, can I come in?" John asked, his voice low and hesitant. I guess," I replied, surprised but unable to deny the thrill that ran through me. He stepped inside, eyes wide with a mix of desire and apprehension. "I just wanted to check on you," he said, taking in the sight of me through the glass door of the shower. The steam surrounded us, and the intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. I could feel the tension between us building again, palpable and electric. "John, we can't," I started, but my words faltered as he stepped closer. "Why not?" "I want you, Jen," he said, his voice low and urgent. Without waiting for a response, he reached for the door, pushing it open and stepping inside, the warmth of the steam enveloping us. "Are you sure?" I asked, my heart racing. "More than ever," he replied, capturing my lips in a heated kiss as he stepped under the water beside me. The warmth of his body against mine sent shivers down my spine. We lost ourselves in the heated embrace, the sound of the water mingling with our soft gasps. The world outside faded away, leaving only the two of us in this intimate cocoon. John's hands wandered across my back, exploring with a mix of curiosity and urgency. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, every touch igniting a fire within me. "Jen," he murmured against my lips, his breath warm against my skin. "This feels so right." I pulled back for a moment, searching his eyes for hesitation. But all I saw was desire, unrestrained and eager. "It does," I admitted, my heart racing at the realization that I wanted this as much as he did. We kissed again, deeper this time, our bodies pressing together under the warm spray. I felt the tension that had built up over the last few days finally break, washed away by the water cascading around us. John's hands slid down to my waist, and I felt my breath hitch as he pulled me closer, our bodies fitting together perfectly. As we kissed, I felt the water running down my body, mixing with the heat of his skin. It was intoxicating, and I lost myself in the moment. John's lips trailed down my neck, sending shivers through me. Each kiss ignited a spark of electricity, and I found myself melting against him. But then, a sudden thought crossed my mind. What if Richard comes back early? I whispered, breaking away momentarily. "He won't," John replied, his voice low and assuring. "We have time." I nodded, the thrill of our secret making my heart race even more. We returned to our embrace, our kisses growing more passionate, more urgent. I felt alive, the warmth of the water and the heat of his body enveloping me completely. After what felt like an eternity in the shower, we finally pulled away, our breaths mingling in the steam-filled air. "We should get out before we raise any suspicion," I said, though every part of me wanted to stay lost in this moment forever. "Yeah, you're right," John replied, but he still looked reluctant to let go. Once we stepped out, I quickly wrapped myself in a towel, my heart still racing. I glanced at John, who stood there, his expression a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. "What just happened?" he asked, a smile breaking across his face. "I think we just crossed a line," I replied, my own heart still pounding. But there was no regret in my voice. I felt liberated, and I knew that whatever happened next, we would face it together. The next day was cloudy and cool, the rain having cleared but leaving a crisp chill in the air. I decided to do some light cleaning around the house, trying to distract myself from the events of the previous day. I found myself in the living room, dusting the shelves when I heard John enter. "Need help?" he asked, his voice cheerful, but I could see a flicker of something else in his eyes. "I've got it, but thanks," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. He moved closer, leaning against the doorway, watching me with an intensity that made my heart flutter. "You know, I've been thinking about last night," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "Me too," I admitted, feeling the tension in the air grow thicker. "Do you regret it?" he asked, stepping closer, his gaze locked onto mine. "No," I said firmly, my heart racing. "Not at all." A smile spread across his face, and before I knew it, he had closed the distance between us, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Good, because I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered, leaning in to kiss me softly. The kiss ignited a fire within me once again, and I melted against him, feeling the warmth of his body against mine. I kissed him back, pouring all the emotion I had been holding back into that moment. We pulled away, both breathing heavily. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I don't know, but I don't want this to end," John said, his voice earnest. "Neither do I replied, my heart racing at the thought of what lay ahead. Over the next few days, our connection deepened. We spent evenings wrapped up in each other, sharing our thoughts, dreams, and fears. Each moment felt like an adventure, an exploration of this new and exciting territory we were navigating together. One afternoon, while I was preparing lunch in the kitchen, John came in, casually leaning against the counter, watching me chop vegetables. "What's cooking?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Just some pasta," I replied, trying to focus on my task but finding it increasingly difficult under his gaze. "Can I help?" he asked, stepping closer, and I nodded, trying to suppress a smile. As we worked together, the air crackled with tension. John was right beside me, and I could feel his warmth radiating off him. Every time our hands brushed, it sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, he reached out, taking my hand in his. "Jen," he said, his voice low, "can I show you something?" Curious, I followed him out to the backyard, where the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow on the grass. John led me to a secluded spot behind the house, a small garden we hadn't tended to in a while. "This is my secret place," he said, looking around, then turning to me with a grin. "I always come here when I want to escape." "It's beautiful," I replied, taking in the vibrant flowers and greenery. As we stood there, surrounded by the beauty of nature, the moment felt magical. John stepped closer, his expression shifting from playful to serious. "Can I kiss you again?" he asked, his voice a whisper. I nodded, my heart racing as he leaned in. His lips found mine, and the kiss was soft at first, then deepened with a sense of urgency. The world around us faded, leaving just the two of us wrapped in our own little bubble. As we pulled away, breathless, I couldn't help but smile. "This place is perfect," I said, glancing around. "Just like you," he replied, and I felt a blush creeping across my cheeks. Our connection grew stronger with each passing day. We spent evenings cooking together, watching movies, and sneaking kisses whenever we could. There was a sense of freedom in our secret, a thrill that came with every stolen moment. On the fourth day of Richard's absence, we found ourselves in the living room again, this time with a bottle of wine and a cozy blanket. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, and the movie playing on the screen became background noise as we focused on each other. "Jen, can I tell you something?" John said suddenly, his tone serious. "Of course," I replied, concerned by the sudden shift in his demeanor. "I think I'm falling for you," he admitted, his eyes searching mine for a reaction. My heart soared at his words, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of fear. "What does that mean for us?" I asked, my voice soft. "It means I want to be with you, no matter what," he said firmly, leaning closer. "I know it's complicated, but I can't help how I feel." I took a deep breath, my heart racing. I feel the same way, John, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. But what about your dad? We'll figure it out, he replied, his voice unwavering. Right now, all that matters is us. With those words, he leaned in, capturing my lips in a passionate kiss. I felt a rush of emotions flooding through me, love, desire, and fear of the unknown. But in that moment, all I could focus on was the connection we shared. As the night wore on, we continued to kiss and explore each other, the world outside forgotten. Every touch sent sparks of electricity coursing through me, igniting a fire that I had never felt before. I lost myself in him, reveling in the passion that had blossomed between us. But as the clock ticked closer to Richard's return, reality loomed over us like a dark cloud. Each stolen moment was filled with the weight of what lay ahead. On the 5th day, I woke early, the sun streaming through the window. I felt a sense of urgency to make the most of our time together before Richard returned. As I moved through the house, I heard John's footsteps behind me. "Good morning," he said, his voice still sleepy. "Morning," I replied, my heart racing at the thought of what we might do together today. We decided to spend the day at home, enjoying each other's company while trying to ignore the impending reality of Richard's return. We cooked, played games, and lounged on the couch, our bodies entwined. In the late afternoon, John suggested we go for a walk around the neighborhood. As we strolled hand in hand, we talked about everything and nothing. It felt natural, as if we had been doing this for years. "Do you think we can make this work?" John asked, his tone serious. "I hope so," I replied, my heart heavy with uncertainty. "But it's going to be complicated." "Complicated is better than boring," he said with a wink, trying to lighten the mood. As we walked, I could feel the weight of our secret pressing down on me. The reality of Richard returning loomed closer, and I wondered what our future would look like once the facade was shattered. As the evening approached, the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the sky. John led me to a small park nearby, where we found a secluded bench nestled among the trees. The air was crisp, and I could feel a sense of anticipation brewing between us. "This place is perfect," John said, glancing around before turning to me, his eyes shining with mischief. "Let's make the most of it." I smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. We settled onto the bench, the warmth of his body radiating against mine as he leaned closer. I could feel the tension building again, that familiar spark igniting between us. "Do you remember the first time we kissed?" he asked, his voice low. "Of course," I replied, a smile creeping onto my lips. It felt like the world had stopped. "Yeah, and I've been thinking about it ever since," he confessed, his gaze locking onto mine. "Every moment since then has only made me want you more." Before I could respond, he leaned in, capturing my lips in a soft yet fervent kiss. The world around us faded away again, and all I could feel was the heat of his body and the urgency of our connection. I wrapped my arms around him, deepening the kiss, our surroundings forgotten. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, I felt a rush of exhilaration. "We shouldn't be doing this out in the open," I said, glancing around to ensure we were still alone. "Why not?" "It's exciting," John replied, a devilish grin on his face. "It's like we're in our own little world, and nothing else matters." "You're right," I said, feeling a thrill at his words. "But let's not push our luck too far." As if to test the waters, John leaned in again, his lips brushing against mine in a teasing manner. I felt myself melt against him, every kiss igniting a fire that spread through my body. The thrill of being discovered only heightened the intensity of our connection. After a few moments, I broke away, my heart racing. "We really need to get back," I insisted, though every part of me wanted to stay right there, lost in him. "Just a few more minutes," John pleaded, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Okay, just a few," I relented, my resolve crumbling as he kissed me again, his hands sliding down to my waist, pulling me closer as the sun dipped below the horizon. We continued to kiss, the world around us growing darker. The thrill of our secret was intoxicating, and I felt alive in a way I had never experienced before. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this carefree, and it was all because of John. Eventually, as the chill in the air began to bite, I knew we had to leave. "Okay, time to go," I said, reluctantly pulling away. "Let's make a plan for when Richard gets back," John suggested as we walked hand in hand back to the house. "Like what?" I asked, curious about what he had in mind. "Maybe we can keep things quiet for a little while longer, figure out our next steps," he said thoughtfully. "I don't want to lose this, Jen." "Neither do I replied, squeezing his hand tightly. "We just have to be careful." When we returned to the house, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us. As we stepped inside, John paused, turning to me with a serious expression. "Let's promise to be honest with each other," he said. No hiding, no running away from this. I promise, I replied, feeling a rush of affection. I want this as much as you do. Good, he said, leaning in for one last kiss, sweet and lingering, before we both knew we had to part ways. As the days passed, we tried to maintain our routine while preparing for Richard's return. We spent more time together, stealing moments whenever we could. We kept our connection alive through playful teasing, shared glances, and lingering touches, all while navigating the uncertainty of what would happen when Richard was back. One night, while watching a movie, John turned to me with a mischievous smile. "Do you think we could sneak away for a bit?" he asked, his tone playful. "Where to?" I replied, intrigued. "I know a place where we can be alone," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Are you serious?" I asked, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Totally," he replied, grinning. "We'll just go for a little drive." After a moment of hesitation, I nodded, curiosity getting the better of me. "Okay, let's go." We slipped out of the house quietly, the cool night air refreshing against my skin as we climbed into John's car. The thrill of our secret adventure sent shivers of excitement coursing through me. As we drove through the quiet streets, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. The world outside seemed to blur as we focused on each other, sharing stories and laughter. We arrived at a secluded spot by a small lake, the moonlight reflecting off the water, creating a magical atmosphere. "This is beautiful," I said, stepping out of the car, taking in the serene surroundings. "Just wait," John said, taking my hand and leading me closer to the water's edge. We sat down on the grass, the soft blades tickling our skin. John wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. I felt safe and cherished in that moment, as if nothing else mattered. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" John asked, his voice soft. "Sometimes," I replied, my heart heavy with the weight of reality. "But right now, I just want to enjoy being here with you." He smiled at that, leaning in to kiss me again, the connection between us stronger than ever. "Let's not worry about anything else," he murmured against my lips. "Let's just be us." As the night wore on, we shared laughter and kisses, losing ourselves in the magic of the moment. The air was thick with tension and desire, and I could feel the anticipation building as we leaned closer. "Jen," John said, his voice barely above a whisper, "can I show you how much you mean to me?" My heart raced at his words, and I nodded, knowing exactly what he wanted. We kissed deeply, our bodies pressed together as the world around us faded into nothingness. With the stars shining above us, I felt as if we were the only two people in the universe. The connection we shared was palpable, and I knew in that moment that we were meant to be together, regardless of the challenges that lay ahead. As the night wore on, we explored each other in ways that made the world outside disappear. Each touch ignited a fire within me, every kiss deepening the bond between us. The water lapped gently at the shore, a soothing sound that echoed the rhythm of our hearts. When the first light of dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I realized how precious our time was. We lay on the grass, intertwined, the warmth of the sun beginning to chase away the coolness of the night. "Promise me we'll figure this out," I said softly, looking into John's eyes. "I promise," he replied, his voice filled with determination. "Whatever it takes." As we made our way back to the house, I felt a sense of hope blooming within me. We had forged a connection that was strong and unbreakable, and no matter what challenges we faced, we would face them together. The days turned into a blur of stolen moments and whispered secrets. John and I became experts at hiding our affection, finding ways to steal away for a kiss or a lingering touch when Richard was busy. The thrill of our secret was exhilarating, but it also weighed heavily on my mind. Finally, the day came when Richard returned home, and I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. As he entered the house, I tried to act normal, though every part of me was on edge. "Hey, how was the trip?" I asked, forcing a smile. "It was good," Richard replied, looking tired but happy to be home. "I missed you both." John and I exchanged a glance, the weight of our secret hanging heavily between us. As the evening progressed, we all sat around the dinner table, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, and I could feel my heart racing every time Richard glanced in our direction. After dinner, I excused myself, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere. I made my way to the living room, where I found John leaning against the wall, his expression serious. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I replied, running a hand through my hair. "This feels so strange." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "But we'll get through this." I nodded, feeling the warmth of his presence soothe my nerves. "Can we talk later?" "Of course," he replied, his eyes softening. After a few more minutes, I headed back to the dining room, where Richard was clearing the table. I helped him, trying to engage in conversation to distract myself from the tension that hung in the air. "Did you bring me anything?" I asked playfully, hoping to lighten the mood. "I brought you a little something," he said, reaching into his bag and pulling out a small trinket. As I gazed at the small trinket Richard handed me, a delicate bracelet adorned with colorful stones, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "It's beautiful, thank you," I exclaimed, admiring the intricate craftsmanship. "It's nothing compared to what you deserve," Richard replied, his smile warm and genuine. As I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, I caught a glimpse of John leaning against the doorframe, watching us with a thoughtful expression. I felt a rush of warmth, knowing he was there, even if we couldn't express our connection openly. Later that evening, as Richard settled down to watch TV, I found myself drawn to John, who was sitting at the edge of the couch, a book in his hands. I made my way over, sitting close enough that our thighs brushed against each other. "Are you reading?" I asked, peering at the cover. "Just a little," he replied, his voice low. "But I can't concentrate with you so close." I chuckled softly, leaning in closer to him, feeling a thrill run through me at the intimacy of the moment. "Maybe we should find a quieter place." He nodded, a spark of mischief lighting up his eyes. "Let's sneak outside for a bit." We quietly slipped out of the house, making our way to the backyard, where the moonlight spilled across the grass like a silver blanket. The night air was cool, and I shivered slightly, realizing how perfect it was to be outside together, away from prying eyes. "Do you remember that time we made up stories about the stars?" John asked, leaning against a tree, a nostalgic smile on his face. "Of course. You always made them sound so magical," I replied, my heart swelling at the memory. "Let's do it again," he suggested. "Only this time, let's pretend we're the stars." I laughed, feeling lighter. "All right, you go first." John tilted his head back, gazing up at the stars. "There's a star up there," he began, his voice soft and melodic. "She's bright and beautiful, and she watches over everything. She has a special friend who helps her shine even brighter, and they share secrets that nobody else knows." I couldn't help but smile at his imagination. "And the friend? What's their secret?" "They dream of touching the earth, to feel the grass beneath their feet and experience love like no other," he replied, his gaze fixed on mine, his tone shifting from playful to serious. "Love like no other," I echoed, feeling a warmth spread through me. I leaned closer, my heart racing. "What if we could experience that kind of love?" "We can," John said, his eyes glinting with determination. "We just have to be brave enough to take the leap." In that moment, I felt a rush of courage. I reached out, taking his hand in mine, intertwining our fingers. "Let's leap together," I whispered, a thrill coursing through me. With that, John pulled me closer, our bodies just inches apart, and I felt the electricity between us spark anew. "Do you trust me?" he asked, searching my eyes. "I do," I replied, my voice steady. With a grin, he leaned in, capturing my lips with his in a passionate kiss, but then he pulled back slightly, an impish look in his eyes. "But I have an even better idea. Close your eyes." I hesitated, but the excitement in his voice encouraged me. "All right," I said, shutting my eyes tightly. "Now, hold your breath," he instructed, his tone playful yet sincere. I complied, my heart racing with curiosity. Suddenly, I felt him lift me off my feet, cradling me in his arms. "John!" I exclaimed, startled but exhilarated. "Just trust me," he murmured, and I could hear the grin in his voice. He started to spin me gently, and laughter bubbled out of me as the world around us blurred in a whirlwind of stars and laughter. When he finally set me down, I opened my eyes, breathless. "That was amazing. I thought you might like it," he said, his smile wide and triumphant. As the moment settled, I realized how much I cherished these little adventures. The way he made me feel alive and free was unlike anything I had ever experienced. "Let's not stop here," I suggested, emboldened by the thrill of our connection. "I want to explore more." John's eyes sparkled with excitement. "What do you have in mind?" "Let's go to that little pond we found last summer," I proposed, remembering the secluded spot surrounded by tall trees. "Perfect," he exclaimed, and without a moment's hesitation, we began walking towards it, hand in hand, our fingers tightly woven together. When we arrived, the moonlight danced on the water surface, casting an enchanting glow all around. "It's just as beautiful as I remember," I said, awestruck. "It's even more beautiful now," John replied, his voice low and sincere. He stepped closer, wrapping an arm around my shoulders, pulling me against him. As I leaned into him, I felt a rush of warmth, and I looked up to find his gaze fixed on me. "Do you ever feel like this is where we belong?" he asked softly. Yeah, I do, I replied, my heart pounding. Like we're meant to find each other in all of this. John's eyes softened, and he leaned in, brushing his lips against my forehead, a sweet and tender gesture that made my heart flutter. Then let's promise to always find our way back here, no matter what. I nodded, overwhelmed by the intensity of our connection. I promise, I whispered, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and belonging. We spent the next few hours sitting by the pond, talking about our dreams, fears, and everything in between. The intimacy of the moment enveloped us, and I felt as if we were creating our own world, one filled with hope and possibility. As the night wore on, John began to playfully splash water at me, and soon we were engaged in a light-hearted water fight, laughter echoing into the night. I couldn't remember the last time I felt so carefree. Okay, truce, I finally exclaimed, panting as I wiped the water from my face. All right, truce, he said, his voice playful. Now what? I asked, still catching my breath. Now, I think we should try something new, he said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. What did you have in mind? I replied, intrigued. Let's make a wish, he suggested, picking up a small pebble from the ground. You toss it in, and I'll follow. Okay, I said, feeling the anticipation build. I held the pebble tightly, closing my eyes. I wish for us to always have moments like this together, I whispered before tossing it into the water. As the stone splashed, John immediately followed suit, tossing his own pebble. I wish for our love to only grow stronger, he said, looking at me with earnest intensity. I felt a rush of warmth at his words, knowing we were forging a bond unlike anything I had ever experienced. I think that's the best wish ever, I said, my heart swelling. With the moonlight reflecting off the water, we sat side by side in comfortable silence, our hearts beating in sync. The world felt far away, and in that moment, I knew that we had found something special, a love that was unique and precious. Eventually, as the night began to draw to a close, we returned home, our fingers still intertwined. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that despite the challenges we faced, our connection was unbreakable. When we arrived, Richard was still awake, watching TV in the living room. He glanced over at us, a curious look on his face. Where have you two been? Just out for a walk, John replied casually, as if nothing was amiss. Looks like you had fun, Richard said, a hint of a smile on his face. We did, I replied, trying to mask the excitement bubbling inside me. After exchanging a few more words, John and I retreated to my room, the adrenaline of our secret escapades still coursing through our veins. As we settled onto my bed, I turned to him, feeling a rush of affection. Thank you for tonight. It was amazing. Anytime, he replied, his gaze warm and inviting. I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. Feeling emboldened by the evening's adventures, I leaned closer, my heart racing. I want to make more memories with you, John. I want to be with you fully. He smiled, leaning in to press his forehead against mine. Then let's make it happen. Just promise me you'll always be honest with me, no matter what. I promise, I whispered, my heart full of hope. With that, we settled into a comfortable silence, our fingers still intertwined as we drifted off to sleep, the promise of tomorrow lingering in the air, filled with possibility. Days turned into weeks, and our connection only deepened. We continued to find ways to explore our feelings for each other, every stolen moment and secret adventure strengthening the bond between us. One afternoon, while Richard was out running errands, I decided to surprise John. I texted him to come over, feeling a rush of excitement. When he arrived, I greeted him with a playful smile. I have a surprise for you. John raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh really? What is it? Just wait and see, I replied, leading him to the living room where I had set up a cozy space with pillows and blankets. Soft music played in the background, creating an inviting atmosphere. Wow, this looks amazing, he said, visibly impressed. I grinned, feeling a rush of happiness at his reaction. I thought we could have a little picnic indoors. Just the two of us. As we settled down on the soft blankets, I felt a surge of nerves. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the opportunity to finally confess my feelings to John. After we shared some snacks and laughter, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. John, can I ask you something? Of course. What's on your mind? He replied, his eyes attentive and encouraging. I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've shared and how much you mean to me. I began, my heart racing. I want to be honest about my feelings. He leaned closer, his expression shifting to one of curiosity and concern. You can tell me anything. I took another deep breath, looking into his eyes, feeling the weight of my words. I'm in love with you, John. I've never felt this way about anyone before, and it terrifies me because I don't want to ruin what we have. but I can't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell you." The room fell silent as I waited for his response, my heart pounding in my chest. I held my breath, searching his face for any hint of how he felt. Finally, a slow smile spread across his face. "You have no idea how happy I am to hear you say that." I blinked, confusion mingling with relief. "Really?" "Absolutely," he replied, his voice filled with warmth. "I felt the same way for a long time. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. I love you too." A rush of joy flooded through me as I processed his words. "You do?" "Yeah, I do," he affirmed, his eyes shining with sincerity. "You make me happier than I ever thought possible." In an instant, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh, a mix of joy and disbelief. "I can't believe we've both been holding back." John chuckled, reaching for my hand, intertwining our fingers once more. "Well, we're here now, and I'm glad we finally said it." "I am too," I said softly, my heart swelling with happiness. "This feels right." We leaned closer, the air between us crackling with electricity as our lips met in a kiss, this one deeper and more passionate than any before. It was a kiss that sealed our confessions, one filled with promise and the shared understanding of what lay ahead. When we finally pulled away, breathless and smiling, I felt a newfound sense of certainty. "So, what now?" I asked, still holding his gaze. "Now," he said, a playful glint in his eyes, "we make the most of our time together. We explore this love, wherever it may take us." I nodded, feeling a thrill of excitement. "I can't wait." With the sun streaming through the window and the music softly playing, we spent the rest of the afternoon wrapped in each other's arms, sharing stories and dreams, our hearts full of love and possibilities. In that moment, I knew that we were just beginning our journey together, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The world outside faded away, and all that mattered was us, two hearts entwined, ready to embrace whatever came next.